mention that I'm very happy that Faris accepted to share his thoughts on the sectarian montage with us, because this started a few months ago. We were having a dinner at Daniel's house in the presence of Ghassan Salhab, the filmmaker who is here tonight. Remember that Faris made a comment about Baghdadi's film and his particular way of making montage, and he said that it reminds him a lot of the posters that Walid Zbib made 3 decades ago. But the conversation did not develop much during that evening, and so it's great that we get to continue. And so what I did for tonight, I made sure that Ghassan would attend, and he's here. And I also thought, how can I get Walid Zbib to attend? So I went to the one place where his posters are sold in Hamra, and I got the number of his mother, who's also attending tonight, and he is with us also. So thank you, Walid, for taking the time. It's lovely that you come back after 3 decades so that we can think about your posters once again. So in the past, we used to say the floor is yours, but I'm not sure this works anymore. Maybe you should say the fiber optics are yours, Faris. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Ali.
Okay.
And yeah, thanks for the introduction and for bringing Walid Zbib and Ghassan here. I didn't know they were coming, but it's because I will be, of course, talking about them to some extent. And so I will start. Huh? Can you hear me?
Yeah, be careful. Walid's mother is here also, so be careful.
Okay. I will do my best to keep it. So I will start. I will talk for a while, and you know, if you have questions while I'm talking, you can ask me. So I will start by sharing my screen now. So can you see the screen?
Yes, we see it.
Yeah, you see it's a picture of Baghdadi. Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm going to present this with a bit thinking that you might not know Baghdadi or his movies. So this is Baghdadi. Baghdadi is born in 1950. At 41, he received the Grand Jury Prize for Hors la Vie, Outside of Life. And before that, he was before that he did a movie, which is a television movie that doesn't circulate as much as the main ones, like Little Wars and Hors la Vie, which is a movie called Liban, Terre de Miel et d'Encens. It's made in 1988. And actually, in this movie, this is when he first started collaborating with Didier Descoings, his scenario guy, the script guy. And to do this movie, Baghdadi called Didier Descoings. Actually, he used to see him in Paris to explain to him how he should think Lebanon. And this is how Didier Descoings explains how Baghdadi actually made him understand what is Lebanon. So,
il y avait un truc qui était adorable. Moi, j'habite à la campagne à 80 km de Paris. Et donc, Maroun venait une fois tous les 2 jours à la maison. Et alors, en plus, c'était tout lui, ça. Il disait, tu prépares pas de déjeuner. Hein. Et il arrivait avec des tas de trucs, des tas de plats libanais qu'il avait fabriqués ou qu'il avait achetés, etc. Et on faisait un festin d'enfer avant de s'enfermer dans mon bureau. Et là, on parlait. Alors, je lui disais ce que j'avais écrit, cette scène que j'avais écrite. Et il me disait, non, toi, ça se passe pas comme ça là-bas, ça, c'est pas ça. Il corrigeait les choses. Il essayait de me faire comprendre ce qu'était vraiment le Liban. Jusqu'au jour d'ailleurs où il a dit, mais tu comprendras pas tant que tu n'auras pas fait une chose qui va te paraître bizarre. Il faut que tu ailles manger du foie cru sur une feuille de papier journal sur le capot d'une voiture la nuit. Je dis, Maroun, t'es malade, t'es fou là. Il dit non, parce que c'est ça aussi le Liban. Et donc je suis à Beyrouth avec lui et j'avais commencé dans une boucherie du foie sur lequel on met des aromates, du sel, etc. Et qu'on a mangé de nuit sur le capot d'une voiture, un capot encore chaud, la nuit aussi était chaude, sur une feuille de papier journal qui relatait je ne sais plus quel attentat, donc une violence extrême sur le bout de papier journal qui s'imbibait de notre régal, de notre festin de foie. Et c'était extraordinaire parce que la douceur du mets que nous consommions et de l'amitié qui se jouait entre lui et moi avec là sur le journal des images de violence, ce contraste était extra. Et là, je commence à comprendre. Je commence à comprendre de quel pays tu es, dans quel pays tu vis, de quel pays tu veux parler. Et donc, on a fait Hors la vie.
Okay. Now he says there is Hors la vie, but actually the scene of the liver and what he's talking about, his first collaboration was on Le Liban, Terre de Miel et d'Encens. So what I really want to underline here is that there's something to understand about Lebanon, apparently, by saying that Lebanon is when you put raw liver on a newspaper at night, which is warm, on a engine, on the hood of a car, most probably a Mercedes or a BMW, as you will see. And you have all these contrasts between heterogeneous elements, raw liver newspaper, on the newspaper you have some assassinations, car explosions, and you have friendship at play, as he says, and all of these elements are brought together in one continuum. And I think really this is how Baghdadi explains to Descoings what there is to understand from Lebanon. At least what I would like to underline here is that he didn't give him a kind of political or historical analysis of Lebanon. He told him, if you want to understand Lebanon, well, buy raw liver, put it on a car, and this is how you understand. What I'm trying to think here is that, at least for a movie maker, for Baghdadi, there is something, the understanding happens by seeing these correlations or relations. And if you're able to see these relations, you understand Lebanon in the shape of what is there, what is manifest. Now, of course, I think that Baghdadi, who has this recurrent theme that he wants to understand the Lebanese context, he really took this form of heterogeneous elements contrasted together, brought together in a kind of highly contrasted continuum, is what he's going to use in his montage as a montage principle. And you find this mainly and mostly, you find it in all his movies, but mainly in Le Liban, Terre de Miel et d'Encens. You find it also a lot in Hors la vie, where you have these constructions of scenes made of these contrasted elements. So I will show you here the opening scene of Le Liban, Terre de Miel et d'Encens, where the story is about a doctor, a French doctor, a humanitarian doctor that is coming to Lebanon. And this doctor is here maybe for humanitarian reasons, maybe for other reasons. And we see how he's arriving to the hospital. This is the scene of the arrival to the hospital. I hope you will count in the shot all the contrast and all the unfitting elements that he is bringing.
Il y avait un truc qui était adorable. Moi, j'habite à la campagne.
So this is the scene.
qu'est-ce que c'est que ce bordel? Moi, je veux bien les faire, les cigarettes, les journaux, mais pas tout ça. Ben, il faut manger tout ça. Hein? C'est un vrai souk. Lorient. Oui, Lorient. Mais je compte sur vous pour me transformer ça en hôpital. Docteur Zwer, chirurgien. Spécialité les entrailles. Capable de vous remettre en marche n'importe quelle tuyauterie, même si une gicle et du kalachnikov, ça fait des trous partout.
Fournier généraliste. Par conséquent, pas de spécialité. Sinon, peut-être le manque d'expérience.
Je vous ferai passer ça. Tenez, si vous voulez, on commence ce soir.
Bon. À base de quoi, le traitement?
À base de belles fesses, de beaux seins, de belles bouches. Reniflez-moi ça. Monsieur, c'est l'appel de ma collection. Je ne m'en lasse pas.
Monsieur docteur Fournier, c'est chaud, c'est brûlant.
Mais Hassan devait me rapporter une aéroport. Est-ce qu'il ne t'a pas filé, Morin?
Non, il je m'en tape de tes cochonneries. Fais visiter la maison. Fournier, moi je monte au planning.
Cochonnerie. Je ne mange pas ces viandes-là, mon ami. Morin, n'oublie pas que tu parles un musulman.
Okay, I hope here you counted a bit the contrast. The hospital, which is a bazaar, the porn movie which is inside the medical kit, and the discourse about sex, which is on a cadaver. And then the hospital itself, well, they sell cigarettes in it and they sell all kinds of things. And in the courtyard of the hospital, you also have all kinds of activities going on. Now, this is a kind of montage which I think is happening already in the shot, which means inside one shot and in the discourse or in what is being said, you already have all of these contrasts which actually form or gives the nerve and the impetus of the movie. Now, this thing goes on like that the whole movie. So after the doctor arrives to the hospital, you have a scene where a militia invades the hospital looking for Abu Ali al-Benzin. They shoot the guy in the bed. Here you have the doctor is held a bit while they're shooting the guy. After the scene, some of the parents of a wounded guy in the hospital make a dinner because their son is in a coma, and hence they make a kind of feast in order to push death or coma away. And in this scene, you have a moment where they sing Frère Jaco coupled with some Arabic tunes, which is followed by a scene, because during the dinner, they say that the Israelis are embarking on the beach, so everyone goes from the dinner to the beach while singing and drinking, and they start shooting at the horizon, and which is followed by the doctor crossing to the east to help from the other side too, followed by a piano scene in the hospital where they're all kind of having a kind of jazzy moment, scenes of skinotique and the made the dinner, the kidnapping of the guy, because when he went to the east, they considered on the west that he was a traitor. So actually the people with whom he was having dinner kidnapped him in order to use him to exchange, as an exchange tool for another hostage. So he's kidnapped by his hosts, and he ends up on the roof with this girl that starts to tell him that he's a prince because she thinks that he's in a way in her castle, given that the place in which he is held captured is practically on the top of the rooftop, where they usually breed pigeons. And here there's this kind of a bit of an insane moment where the girl starts to tell him how handsome he is and he's a prince and stuff like that. And while he's in a total paranoid state because he thinks he's gonna get shot. So the movie ends on an explosion where he runs away from the pigeon house, and this brings it to a closure. And after he runs from the pigeon house, following the explosion, he resumes his work. So I'm just giving you here the series or remind you of the series in case you watch the movie, just to see the hectic sequence. And each one of these sequences is structured like that. So you have really a moment where he gets there, his hospital is attacked, he moves, he's kidnapped, he gets out, there's a dinner which is at the same time pushing away the comatic state of someone, and so on and so forth. Now, the rhythm of the movie is like that practically the whole hour and a half, which made me think in this kind of really like you have non-stop series of unexpected events which are going on of the posters of Walid Zbib. Now, these posters, I used to watch them on Bliss Street, so I remember them very well. They used to be fun to watch because we used to try to guess everything which is going on. And what I think is present here is really like this condensation of improbable and impossible kind of actions and events. And the game in relation to these posters consisted in really looking and finding what is hidden somewhere, because there are plenty of details. There's really a kind of concentration of incredible actions. And I think that what I'm trying to say is that all of these events or all of these unexpected actions are connected together via a kind of actual contrast. So I did here a little montage of my own. So in the poster, you can find, for example, you can find a guy asphalting the street, which was a recurrent theme in Lebanon. You have the classical contrast between the woman in a chador and the woman which is dressed as we say, the Western style. You have a woman here with TNT driving a car, a kidnapping, an explosion in a building, people making out in an ambulance with a guy being ripped off, a dog trying to commit suicide, Darth Vader in the Motka Cafe, people holding kind of not hostage, but about to execute two other people. And you have a man peeking on the panties of a dead woman, and so on and so forth. So you also have a rally paper, and all of these are really building one jammed and one continuum. And you see, like, you really jump from one to the other, and they all coexist into this day. I think what needs to be underlined too is that it's a day. It's not a dream state. It's not something which is happening from some kind of unconscious or some kind of where you have anamorphosis and where things mix together. It's really the day or a nice day in Beirut in the 80s. I think this was really for us young. What was really fun was to really look at that and look at the humor and delirium which you find in that. And I think this delirium, this way of seeing Beirut in the 80s, you find it in Walid Zbib's posters, but I also feel it's, as I tried to show you in short, it's very present in Baghdadi's movies, the movies of the 80s. Now, this is not only proper to artwork. I really think that the reel itself unfolds into this form. So you have here Edmo Naim talking on the phone in his house or office, and you have this kind of contrast. You have scenes like that which are quite usual, a marriage in the ruins of Beirut. You have things like that too, where you have these injection of military stuff with everyday objects. And you have this kind of scene where you feel that the civilian side and the militia side, or the war side and the civil side, are really intertwined and intermixed. in a kind of mixture where you have in the same time a humor, something glamorous, something attractive, but also it's mixed with horror and with all kinds of atrocities. So this is the scene from Baghdadi's Little Wars. At one point, Suraya, she goes down and she takes a tour with the militia guys of the neighborhood, and it's a moment of détente. It's really a moment where you take your time and you have a stroll in the city. Which echoed or reminded me of this other picture that I found about the Lebanese war. So you have really this intertwine, it's really intertwined. And when you intertwine the civil side with the war side, you end up having these kind of hectic effects. Now, this is from Rusleen Saab. It's before the war. And this is how a guy apparently about to play tennis is speaking about what is to come.
Ils ont peur de quoi? Ils ont peur de quoi tirer dessus. Ils ont peur de voir le pays comme ça sauter comme une petite grenade. Et moi personnellement, j'ai 33 ans, j'ai jamais manié une arme. Et encore moins éprouvé le besoin d'en acheter une. Donc, et aujourd'hui, je suis armé. Je suis armé, comme tout le monde d'ailleurs. Je ne vais pas vous donner la liste des armes que je tiens parce que je vois passer la pluie. Mais n'empêche.
Okay. So here, I really, what I like here is the context of this guy, with his, he's hoarding weapons at home. Now, this was before the war. Before the war, you had this kind of projection of getting armed because the war is coming. And here you feel that the cut or the actual cut is between this kind of civilian aspect and the war to come. Now, this is after the war. After the war, we had this kind of images where you feel that now the cut was consumed. Many militia men and women, they as Walid knows better, they wrote books, they had their moment of returning to either a civilian life or a religious life. And here you see that here the cut now was consumed, meaning the war happened indeed, and now this contrast that you used to find playing on the surface in Baghdadi was interiorized. It was taken inside the characters. So you have images like that. For example, this is from Jaja's election. I don't know if you remember that, but at one point, Jaja wanted to get elected as the president of the Lebanese Democratic Republic. And in the ballot, you had the names of the people he assassinated. For me, this is like the typical contrast that you can find in this montage that I'm trying to show. You have this kind of, in this case, return of the name in this electoral game. Now, of course, when I say that, of course, there are political reasons for this fall, which means the fact that you have all of these cuts, the fact that you have an intertwinement of violence and friendship, of being a friend and being the one, and then your friend ends up kidnapping you. The fact that the war is happening at home. All of these features which end up unfolding into these actual cuts, they have, of course, a historical background. Now, if you want to make it very short, I think that the ground or the historical ground for that is the creation of Lebanon as a meta-stable entity. As you know, Gouraud advocated for big states like Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and stuff like that. Big states in the Middle East that are going to be self-sufficient enough, but unstable enough in order for the colonial powers to be able to intervene. You know, on the creation of Lebanon in 1920, two events were quite present. It was the famine around 1910 and the victory over the army of Faisal in 1920 by the French army. Now, the Gouraud thought that if you keep Mount Lebanon, which is of a Christian majority, and you annex towards the Bekaa, it would be too stable. So his idea was to add to Mount Lebanon the Bekaa in order to have some kind of sufficiency when it comes to food, and the cities of Tripoli, Beirut, and Saida in order to break the majoritarian kind, or to break the homogeneity of the population. Now, this allows him to have this kind of metastable effect. Now, the idea here is that when you do this, and Gouraud was doing this, in order to implement in the Orient what he calls a door to the Middle East, because the experience with Faisal made it such that he understood that Lebanon would be a good place to control the insides of the Middle East. And in the same time, he wanted to create a place where the French interest can have a base. So you have this kind of dichotomy that you will find later in the Constitution. As Fawaz Trabulsi says, the Constitution is itself, it has in itself a dichotomy where you have a part which is civilian. You have almost a French constitution on one side, constitution on one part, and you have a confessional electoral system on the other part. And this dichotomy is expressed, as Fawaz Trabulsi says, it's expressed in the fact that you have a national pact and a constitution as the two founding texts. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that this dichotomy, civil war, muwatinin, ahlin, you know, this kind of having as a general organizing scheme two pieces, and not only one piece, not only one vision, has, of course, political, historical grounds. And the main idea behind that is that the periphery of capital, of the center of capitalism, needs to create on its periphery, needs to create sectarian regimes. Now, what is a sectarian regime or a sectarian system? A sectarian system is not just a place where you have confessions. A sectarian system, the way I understand it, is when you have a highly advanced technological or service system coupled with something archaic. So if you want, in Saudi Arabia, I think it's also a sectarian system because you have a highly advanced petrochemical industry coupled with Wahhabism. And this is what gives you the two sections, the two sects. The two sects are not Islam and Christianity. They are, in Lebanon, the banking and service system coupled with the confessional electoral system. Knowing that the confessional electoral system comes from an archaism. Mehdi Amil says it comes from the Iqtaji system and it was inherited and then coupled to the banking system. And when you have that, as Gouraud thought, you can now have a control because via the confessional representation, as you know, you have your allies, which are minorities usually, and these minorities whose places are secured via the confessional electoral system, they allow the development of the banking and service system. Okay, I hope now you got this kind of structure. So if you take the sectarian structure, is that you have the za'ims, as Mehdi Amil thinks. So you have the landlords coupled with the financial group. Usually the merchant capital or the middle classes are allies with the financial groups, and the working class is following the za'ims. Now, this gives you a stable structure that allows the perpetuation of the situation where the landlords and the financial groups can perpetuate their exploitation. Now, for Mehdi Amil, the only way out of that is to have an alliance between a working class having a political representation and where the merchants and the middle classes move on to the side of the political alliance between the workers and the political party against, in the same time, the Western kind of support and the financial and the Zaim groups. Okay, now the issue, I'm telling you all of that because this situation, which Mehdi Amil theorizes in في أسباب الحرب الأهلية, well, it practically never happens. It never happens, and it happened almost in the 2 years war, meaning between 75 and 77, and it happened only for 2 years, and it was defeated. So if you look, I'll go very quickly on these. If you look at these, this is, if you want, a summary of the Lebanese history in a diagram, if you can call it like that. 1943, you have an alliance between the financial group and the merchants, meaning Khouri and Salah, against the Zaim, which were more pro-French. And this led to the, the independence. After that, the Shamoun, etc., allies with the Zaim against the consortium of Khouri. And here you have the constitution of the Patriotic Social Front against the financial group of Khouri. The thing is that with the Baghdad Pact, Shamoun moves to the side of Khouri again, to the side of the financial groups, leaving the Jmayil and Jumblat as representing the social claims against the capitalist claims. But with the second Nakba and the Palestinian question, Jmayil is going to split from Jumblat and move to the side of Shamoun, and hence here you have a first kind of block preparing the war where you have a popular base, a Zaim, a financial group, and the merchants together on the side of what came to be known as the Christian side, and where here you have this configuration. Now, the war itself of 75-77 is due to the militarization when the PLO comes in after the Cairo agreement, and hence both sides now have weapons and you have the 2 years war. Now, for Mehdi Amil, this is the only solution that can change the system. For Mehdi Amil, really, if you read this book, there's only one way out of the enduring situation of crisis in which Lebanon is, which is to have a political party allied with a popular base, ideally on his side also the people of Jmayil against the Western interests. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen because of issues of identities, Palestinian question, and the like, which led, after the defeat of the revolutionary side, to the war order. And today you have something like that. Today you have, weirdly enough, you have a situation where the financial groups and the popular base, etc., are forming a bloc, which is almost symmetrical to this one. And weirdly enough, or at least for the time being, the financial group is part of the system, which is on the eastern side. Now, whatever is the case, all of this is just to tell you one thing, that if you look at all of these conflicts, all of them together, none of them leads to a resolution. And because none of them leads to a resolution, you have a situation where the events do not cumulate. The events do not cumulate once you have this kind of aesthetics. So to take it again, all I'm saying is that what Mehdi Amil calls the enduring political crisis of Lebanon unfolds or manifests itself into a stagnating time. Now, if you look at the movies of Baghdadi, time doesn't move. You feel that time is just stopped, even though you have a plethora of unexpected actions and events, time is on hold, meaning the actions are just actions where you have, or that occur as the most unexpected action. And I think really the art of Baghdadi is to find the difference which is going to be the most contrasted, like the porn movie and the dead guy. What to put with what in order to have the biggest contrast, or like having the guy kidnapped by his host and then ending up on the rooftop of his the little girl who is in love with him. Now, all of these are unexpected, contrasted action, but contrary to modernist cinema, they do not form a chronological time, because chronological time is a time where time unfolds in accordance with a unified concept. For example, if you have the American Dream, or if I take Eisenstein, the Russian Revolution, if you take a movie by Eisenstein, you really have a sequence where it is in accordance with the rational order of the revolution. For example, if you take Potemkin, you have the presentation of the scene, the first conflict, the escalation of the conflict, and then you have a resolution. Now, this would be a chronological time, and this time is leading to the manifestation or to the realization of the revolution. Now, given that in the sectarian world, we have this kind of duality, the concept itself is dual. You have confessional and civilian. You have civil and war, and this is constituted. What happens is you don't have a narration that progresses through images that accumulate in order to lead to an understanding of the concept. But what you have is these repetitions of contrasts, and the contrasts do not accumulate. Now, to put this, to make this more concrete, I'll give you just an example from Eisenstein and its contrast with Baghdadi. Because I think that Baghdadi is a modernist movie maker. It's a modernism of related to the Lebanese situation. In Eisenstein, you have a cycle between the images and the meaning. So when you see the Potemkin is followed by a series of images that make you understand what is going on. So the differentiation of the concept, meaning the more you put images, the more you understand what is going on. And when you put a lot of images, you reach a new understanding. This is what Eisenstein calls dialectical montage, meaning the concept unfolds or is specified in images. Let's suppose Russia, then you see poverty, struggles, and then little conflicts. And then this moves to anger. And from anger, you have a new concept now. You have a new series of images, which is people getting armed, people wanting war, and it moves on like that. So if you want, as Eisenstein says, nature is not indifferent, which means the meaning or the concepts that we have unfold into images, but the images make us understand something new, which leads to a new meaning and hence the need to unfold into a new series of images. And this is the spiral. The figure of the spiral that Eisenstein speaks about is that when you have sadness and you express sadness, you see a sad man, and then you see sad water, then you see sad ships. And when the whole world is sad, this leads to anger. And when you have anger, instead of having a sad water, you'll have firearms. So you have a new sequence, so on and so forth. Now, what I think is quite interesting in Baghdadi is that first, nature is indifferent. And it is indifferent because it's one of the actual contrasted elements. In a Baghdadi movie, you have war, and then you have a beautiful sea with people having lunch or skinotique. Or you have a beautiful scenery of nature, as if nature is completely indifferent to that. This is the first point that I can underline. The second one is that the never-ending accumulation of unexpected cuts doesn't lead to a new concept, but only turns in the same or under the same umbrella. So instead of having a kind of cycle between images and concept, all what you have is repetitions and repetitions of the same concept. This is why, if you want, the form of the action movie in Baghdadi functions around repetitions, reversals, and meshing. I explained that. So what are the repetitions? The repetitions are the repetitions of the actual cuts. So you have mazes and war, love, then he kills her, all kinds of never-ending, unexpected actions that repeat. Now, with that, you have a meshing of all of these actions. And you have the general narration articulated around points of reversal. What is a point of reversal? If you take Little Wars simply is a story about 3 reversals. You have Talal, which is a secular guy, most probably an AUB student or something like that, who loves music and things like that, who reverses into a landlord, and he starts committing crimes in the mountains, or not crimes, but he leads the war in the mountains. And we know that he is committing massacres in the mountains before a second reversal when he goes a bit crazy, when he starts shooting people in the city just like that. The other character, Suraya, is also a kind of civilian character. And the whole movie is about seeing how she's gonna reverse into a woman who uses a guy to kidnap a banker in order to get money from him to solve her issues. The third reversal is Nabil himself, where he turns from a journalist into a kind of psychopath or a kind of completely deranged character. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that if you take a classical American movie, the characters are well defined. You have the good guy, the bad guy, and then the goal is also well defined, which is to achieve either freedom or money or success. And then you have a situation where we see the overall picture. You see the 2 characters, you have a presentation of the situation, and then you have, after the parallel montage that presents the situation, we are in New York, the guy is here, the other guy is there. You have a convergence towards the duel, new situation, and at the end you have a resolution. For example, if you take the movie by Dwairi, the Insult. I think the movie by Dwairi is bad only for one reason, not because it's a bad movie. I think there's a lot of craft in it. But the only bad thing about it that I can think of is that it doesn't get the sectarian atmosphere. And why it doesn't get it? Because if you look at the Insult, you have the Palestinian guy versus the Maronite guy, and then you have conflict. You have first a preparation of the conflict, duels, another duel, and then a democratic resolution in the court, and in a kind of, it ends in a kind of friendship. And I think that what's strong is the pattern as such. While the characters and the montage in Baghdadi, where the characters are themselves dichotomous, where you feel you don't know when they're gonna shift, you don't know when they're gonna flip. And the whole interest in the characters of Baghdadi is that they shift from civilian to confessional, from confessional to sectarian. This is for the characters. And the montage itself is functioning on actual cuts, meaning not on rational cuts. He doesn't cut in accordance with the unfolding of the concept. He cuts by actual contrast. And last, you have the narration functions by reversals, by really like big lines of reversals. And this is the only interesting in the narrations that come from the sectarian world, because what you need to see is these points of reversals. The story is there. So I hope this is more or less clear. What I'm trying to say is that the sectarian structure, with its never-ending conflicts that don't lead anywhere, with the fact that it is instituted on a dichotomy, all of these elements reach manifestation in the form of the sectarian cinema that we see in Baghdadi's movie. And for me, this is, if you want, the interesting point. Now, in Baghdadi, you have another subform that we'll talk about. It's not just these meshing of actual cuts. You have sometimes a form which is a jigsaw. If you watch Oghlavi is really like you go up and down. He's gonna be freed, then he's incarcerated. He's beaten, then he's loved. He's a friend, then he's an enemy, and goes up and down, because the character himself, Perrault, he has a line, he has a chronology. He's backed up by the embassy, and he's gonna be freed at one point. So he has a linear chronology. This is why the form of the movie takes the shape of a jigsaw. But in Little Wars, on the other hand, the shape of the movie is a swirl that goes deeper and deeper. You feel that the only orientation for the repetition of this actual cut is to go deeper into the madness of this place, because you don't have a foreigner which has a chronological time. So when you couple a chronological time with a stagnating time, you get the jigsaw form, which is a kind of in-between, in-between form. So, so to illustrate that, I'll just show you the sequence from Oghlavi. I hope you'll find the elements into that.
Are you sick? You speak English, don't you?
I'm cold.
You know why I speak English? Because I've been living in the States for 5 years. I was an actor. Yeah, man. De Niro. You know Bobby De Niro? I was his bodyguard. Sure. Talking to me? You talking to me? Are you talking to me? But who the hell else are you talking to? Are you talking to me? But I'm the only one here. But who the fuck you think you're talking to? Oh yeah? Shithead.
Okay, I call you De Niro. Anything new, De Niro?
We put you in this prison because you are bad. You tried to escape. This is not good. Our chief has a brother. He's in prison in France. We want to exchange you with him.
I have only given mon I have published a statement, a picture. Michael and
Cool it, man. Cool it. I'll make you a big favor. I'll let you go for a walk, alone, free, no bandage, no guards. Relax, man. Just relax. Don't listen to the devil. He tells you, take a horse, move the barrier, and run to us. Don't do it, man, don't. I'm here to protect you from yourself. Go, 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 go. Go, man. Go. You know where we are? On the front line. يلا يا عادل جيب الفرس. This is Lebanon, man. Don't trust your eyes. Things are never the way they look. There's always a snake behind the rock.
So I'm going to conclude on just a remark on what I'm doing. So if you take, really me, I think that thinking about these things here, which means seeing that in Lebanon you have a stagnating time, concepts are dual, that when you look at someone, he could be civilian or sectarian or confessional. You don't know if your neighbor was the guy bombing you, stuff like that. when you have delirious storytelling, a bit like what you have seen here, where you have a web of all of these contrasts, be it cultural pieces glued with war situation, you don't know if the guy is playing or terrorizing Peru, all of that orchestrated with actual cuts and the form, which is a jigsaw or a kind of deepening spiral. Now, this is the language, as far as I'm concerned. I can clarify it in the QA if you want. For me, this is the language of the manifest itself. And this is a language which is only touching on the form of montage of the manifest, which means that this is a language which is only dealing on how you put things together. And here I insist on this point because of that. If you take politics, psychology, philosophy, they can explain the reason why of things, but they can't explain the form of having this with that. Which means if you have a guy in a pigeon house, which is kidnapped by his host, and you can explain that politically, that yes, indeed, you know, French used to live here, they used to colonize Lebanon, and because of that, they end up being kidnapped. This is a political explanation. But the fact that you have a little girl telling him stories about how he's her prince in the same time, the fact that you have the guy kidnapped here and the girl telling him stories about her kind of fantasy world, this connection cannot be explained, I think, neither politically, nor psychologically, nor philosophically. It has to be named. That's the name, which means, why do you have a kind of rally paper car with a kidnapping, with a car explosion, with Darth Vader in the Motka Cafe? You can explain each one of these elements politically, historically, psychologically, etc. But you cannot explain the form which is between them. The fact that you have this and that needs to be named. And for example, me, I name it an actual cut. The type of montage which is implicated here is to put these contrasted heterogeneous elements. And I think this is what Baghdadi is saying. This is what needs to be understood, which means that the manifest as such, manifestation as manifestation, has a modality of understanding which cannot be reduced to neither history, politics, philosophy, which are usually the corpuses that we bring to explain cinema or to explain images. And I think that the explanations that don't approach images by the form of the images, be it the types, I didn't talk here about the types, I just talked about the montage, be it the type of montage or the types of perception, the types of speech, the types of thought, the types of emotion. I think here Walid did a lot of work on extracting from the Civil War ways of speaking, ways of witnessing, ways of seeing, ways of feeling, etc. And I think that this kind of work on showing or on making the manifest is what I call aesthetics. And I think really the kind of the problem in what we do, in what I think I work in here, is to reduce aesthetics to one of the other systems. So if you want, here, this is by Walid Rad. I'll just give you one word on that. You know, this work, Secrets on the Open Sea by Walid Rad, where Bukhat Hume says that the blue is a symbol of peace. And hence, Walid Rad is a great artist because you see he makes great monochromes, like then he cites a number of artists. And he tells him that you're doing this as a symbol of peace, the NATO, the Virgin Mary, and the like. For me, this is a representational subsumption, meaning this image here, its meaning is peace. And Walid Rad answer, I think, is quite interesting because he answers that actually it's neither about peace nor anything of that kind. It's just that he used to work in a gallery, the Knox Art Gallery, so he was confronted to monochromes. And at the same time, he used to call Beirut. And this is why you have here a black photo in a montage with these monochromes. And actually, his situation of an immigrant in the US is what makes this kind of images. So here, what I'm trying to say is that the image is already in the real. There's no difference between, the image and reality. The real as such, the real as manifested, has its own ways of doing montage. And one of the montage by Walid Rad is to put, for example, the phone calls about the war with the monochromes about the Knox Art Gallery, which ends up into this image. I think the concept of excessive witness by Walid is in the same trend of thought. You have a situation where they're bombarding a neighborhood next to you, you're sitting safely at home, and this creates an aesthetical situation, to call it like that, meaning you see things in a very specific way, which is the excessive witnessing, which is then amplified and concentrated in works of art, for example, like in the work of art of Rania Stefan, where you have this enactment of the situation. So what I'm trying to say is that aesthetics is really a way to bring the manifest to manifestation. And the problem would be to repress that under other considerations. For example, if you take the aesthetical line, for me, the real disaster is to subsume images to meaning. We can read a lot like, the representation of the militiaman in Baghdadi's movies, the representation of the Arab, of the terrorist, etc., so on and so forth. And I think that this thought by representation makes images just convey meaning. And if images just convey meaning, well, you don't see anymore how they function, how they are actual relations between ways of seeing, speaking, ways of putting things together. And this is what gets repressed. Now, why is it important to unveil that? I think it's important to unveil this because the representational approach will not allow a kind of cultural production which is specific to a place. If you just worry about the way Arabs or terrorists or militiamen or women are represented in the arts, or if you take a political theory to make it the representative kind of locus or the source of meaning for all the images that you see, like, this is American individualism, this is communist workers, this is that. Or even I can think of Zizek with his, naming each image by a psychoanalytical category. This is when he's at his, not in his good shape, I think. Like when he says, and the birds are the unconscious, and you have 3 stories in the house because the upper story is the superegos, the middle floor is the ego, and the lower one is the id, and stuff like that. For me, all of these codifications are really like bad because you miss what is going on in the image. And why is it important not to miss that? Because if there is a form of real politics on the level of cultural production, it is that spaces produce an inherent aesthetics, which is an aesthetics inside the things, and cultural productions that can resist the hegemony of the forms which are imported, like the one of Dwairi, or like the Hollywood form, etc. To resist that, you need to really be aware of what is going on here as a form and bring it to manifestation. This is what would be the work of art. So I will start practically here. This is a periodization of the actual cut. I think that the actual cut was playing on the surface in the war years. And here you have a migration. For example, in Baghdadi, you had a period where it was political and virtual. Then you have movies where you felt that Beirut is cut due to the 2 years war. And you have a cut between the past and the present of the war. And then you have the apocalyptic phase, which is known, and where you have the actual cut really spreading on the surface. With Hariri, who destroyed, who himself brought in a new global actual cut, you have, I think, postures such as that of Walid, the Ana-modernist one, the postmodern posture of Walid Rad, and the resurrection of tradition by Tufi, which are, I think, in this case, the actual cut was interiorized. So if you take movies like those of Ghassan, I think that the characters are really pregnant with a past that is undefined. And this past is really weighing in them, and you feel that their movement, their behavior is really disturbed by this weight. And here you feel that the actual cut became vertical. It became really between the inside of the character and the external world that doesn't fit anymore this inside. And this is really like literally for me the unfolding of the war. You had a moment of war where you lived the war with all its violence, etc. And then you had the reconstruction that erased all of that in a kind of clean cut. And then you have this contrast between what you have inside and what you see in the external world, which is the vertical actual cut. And last today you have this one, which is a new species of actual cut, where for the first time I think you have an explosion related to the whole of Beirut. Usually explosion used to be like in Baghdadi, sporadic and punctual, or internalized like in works such as those, I think, theorized by Walid and the movies of Ghassan. But here you really have a kind of cut which is on the global scale. So movies on this, I think, are a bit interesting because you find parallel montage for the first time when they try to reconstruct the Beirut port explosion, where you have a parallel montage between the different places, and then how all of them blew up in the same time. And this gives you the global view of explosion. You see, in Baghdadi, you have very few global shots. The global shot in Baghdadi always comes in the middle of the movie. This is just a remark, meaning you never see it at the beginning of the movie because there's no unified Beirut. And you can't really say that this is Beirut and it's a unity. So what Baghdadi does is that he puts it always after moments of extreme violence, where you then project on the global shot all the segments and the sections that you have seen. I think with the Beirut explosion, what's interesting is that global shots appear, like the whole Beirut being destroyed, and not just a neighborhood. And this is by Walid Zbib, which is in 2019. I found it interesting. It's just before the Beirut explosion, where you had like the global destruction of Beirut. So I'll stop here. Sorry if I was long. I think I did 50 minutes, something like that. So these are the main, the main ideas. I can clarify things if things are a bit too, I don't know, not too clear. And by the way, you can talk as long as you want. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know, you have to see with the regulation, but for me, I'm fine. You can talk as long as you want. I don't have much to do. And really, I enjoy these things. They are rare for me. So I can stay and you can, take your time. There's no need to cut you after 1 minute, so you can speak if you feel like it on these things. Oops. So do you have any questions, or is it more or less clear? Do you still see the screen or not? Yeah, okay.
Good.
Can I jump in?
Yeah,
Please.
Hello.
Yes.
Actually, I was looking for your picture because I didn't find it on the internet to put it. Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank Dr. Faris for including me in this presentation. And the way you explained the poster is brilliant. You didn't miss any detail. It's like you went into my mind and you saw what I was trying to do. And second, I want to thank Professor Sadiq for going through all this trouble to bring me in. You made my day. I've been out of Lebanon for more than 10 years now. I've been going back and forth, but for the past 10 years, I haven't been there. And you really brought me back to Lebanon through this presentation, and it made my day. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you. Where are you now, Walid?
I'm in Florida.
Oh, wow. What time is it now?
Like 12:30 something.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming. Really, I didn't expect your presence here, but I'm really happy that you were here.
Yeah, it all happened today, this morning. I got the invitation.
I was looking at the name, I said, but this is Walid Zbib. What is he saying?
I guess it was Walid, Professor Walid, the surprise
Walid,
for you guys.
Walid, I'm curious, were you familiar with Maroun Baghdadi's films?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay, all right.
These things they relate.
My whole family is in the art field. My sister, I don't know if you know Maya Zbib, she's the co-founder of Zukak theater in Lebanon. My other sister, she was also a producer and she's story writer. So most of us are in the art domain in different ways, and we always follow the Lebanese artists and what's going on.
Great, great.
في حدا رافع ايده. Somebody.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I guess.
I don't see the hands.
Yeah, we don't. I think it's because you're sharing your screen, maybe.
It's Philippa. It's Philippa.
Okay, Philippa. Now I see them. Okay.
Hi. It was actually a great presentation and a great way to reinterpret his work. And it made me actually curious about a parallel between two other films, which were not mentioned now. Actually, Little Wars, but another one, which is Whispers, in which Nabil is brought again, but in a different angle and for different purposes. While in one, he's one of the protagonists, in the second, he takes part of the documentary in how he's filming and recording the city, but also the war itself. And I was interested in how we could read his presence in both.
But for me, Whispers, for example, pertains to the phase prior to Nabil in the Little Wars, where he really incarnates this kind of fabulatory, hectic character. Are you still here, Philippe? Yeah. So for me, Whisper, for example, you feel that the documentary is constructed on the rupture that happened, which was a bit nightmarish and very sudden for those who lived in Lebanon for a while, which happened really quickly, which is the destruction of the city center. And the Whispers structures around this cut, which affected the history of Beirut, if you can call it like that. So you used to live in a kind of world which is fine, and all of a sudden, in less than 2 weeks, you have this brutal rupture where the whole city center district is destroyed. And actually, in Whispers, if you want to get the montage structure, before I move to Nabi, the montage structure is, we find it in Jasmine Saab, Beirut Jamais Plus. It's the same structure where you have the city center, which is freshly destroyed, and the voices are recalling how it used to be. It's really like a fresh memory. And in Jasmine Saab, you have the music of the cabarets and the music of the hotel played on the still fresh destruction. You see the clothes still on the floor. You see actually bottles and stuff like that in the hotel, and she plays the music of the heydays on the, so you have this kind of structure. Now, I think in the Whispers, Nabil, he's explaining his way of getting pictures, and he explains, if I remember well, he explains clearly that, you know, in Lebanon, if you want to get authentic pictures, you have to lie a lot. You have to lie to the army, you have to lie to the militias, you have to make up stories if you want to get the images that you want to get. And he's taken as a character, I think, portraying this kind of journalism during the war that is oriented now towards, this is what I think, more or less oriented towards a better future, which is a bit all the characters that Baghdadi picked after the destruction. And for him, the dichotomy is between destructive forces and constructive forces following this brutal cut. I think later, with the apocalyptical days, Nadir really is the incarnation of this hectic montage, because the way he speaks, the way he goes into deliriums, the way he's all the time jumping from one theme to the other, is, if you want, he takes that posture more than the posture of the journalist, which is doing his job more or less well. This is what I think was the belong. Is that more or less clear, Philippa, or no?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I really think that the character himself functions differently in these two situations. In one situation, he is towards kind of the future, and the other one, he's like completely, he's like a web of contacts. Yes, Ghassan, I saw your hand. Ghassan?
Yeah. Faris, maybe if you unshare your screen, you'll be able to see. Sorry, Hassan, just for a minute, and then you can.
I stop sharing or I share?
I think it might be easier if you unshare for a little bit, just so that you can see, and then share when you need. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, I see the hand.
Okay.
I can see them.
Okay.
But I can't see them in order. So yes, Ghassan.
Hello, everybody. Even if I
Hello,
don't know everybody, but hello anyway. Walid, I didn't know. Oh, sorry, I have to speak in English. I didn't know that you are the brother of Maya. Okay, marhaba.
Marhaba, marhaba. Maya is the pride of the family. She's doing an amazing job in Lebanon.
She's a friend, so
oh, wallah.
I won't contradict. Faris, I have to go into this word montage that you use very oftenly, and I don't agree with you at all.
Yeah, that's cool.
At all, as you know.
That's fine.
سوري ما عم بسمعك منيح شو بدي اقول عفوا
Faris, if you have headphones, maybe put them on. It's quite difficult to hear you right now.
I don't know if the headphone will arrange
change.
That. Is my voice okay, by the way?
Yes,
is it
your
okay?
voice is clear.
Okay. You're using the word montage out of مش out, sorry, مش out. Not in a cinematographic way, if I may use. You're using it, why not? Huh? Of course, montage, it's not the possession, I mean, cinema doesn't possess this word, of course. But Maroun Baghdadi is a filmmaker. You're using this word montage with a filmmaker, not with somebody out of cinema. So for me, I understand, I fully follow you. I can agree on things and not agree. I can find that you jump, for me, a bit quick, easily on things, but this is something else. But about this word montage, especially that you invoke, Einstein, there is a thing here. Maroun, I follow you, what you're saying about this Maroun Baghdadi putting in his cinema the paradoxes of this city, of this country, if I may say. And he fully, of course, understand it. And he built his film through that, the paradoxes, which is not so anti-Hollywoodian if we know about what they called in the 60s, 70s, the new Hollywood, that completely integrated that in the 60s, 70s. They blowed literally up this concept of, this dichotomy, bad, evil, whatever. But of course, very quickly in the 80s, Hollywood wrap it again and says it's, I mean, the game is have to stop. So they go back in this dichotomy, of course, except some filmmakers who didn't give shit about that. So I understand that only in his writing, even if it was this French writer, his name, Didier Decoing, something like that, and only in his writing, but not cinematographically, not in a montage. The montage is totally in the convention of, I don't want to use the word Hollywood, because Hollywood bring so different movies and so great movies and so bad and whatever. So let's conventional work. I can call it simply conventional, not classical, which is very different. And this is another kind of paradox, by the way, to go into your words. Maroun Baghdadi used a very conventional way of editing and shooting and even writing, but not the characters, because he is totally from here. He understood fully. But it happens that I knew the guy, by the way, but it happens, not it happens, I mean, that's a fact that he totally integrated that, as you said very clearly, and I agree totally with you, things don't move even if they seem to move. Things don't change even if they seem to change, because after all, they go from an action to another action, but to stay on the same point, moving sands, if you want to use it. But cinematographically, this is very problematic for me. He didn't use the whatever language of cinema. After all, cinema have a lot of languages. He didn't use that, because if you look at his film, very simply, of course, I'm not going to make any stupid course here, because I don't want to do that. But if you look simply his work, it is, and by the way, we've seen it in the different extracts you show. It's very conventional way of editing and shooting. There is nothing peculiar except this paradox and the paradox, because this usually goes. I don't know if Maroun had this intention. I never spoke really cinema with him, because we were in the same generation, so we didn't really speak about that. But I don't know if it was his intention to use a conventional way of doing so, to put non-conventional, but he didn't invent that, let's be very clear. It started quite ago before him, and out of Lebanon, because the people who are not so clear in this or this, as a psychological, if I may say, archetype, I mean, it's almost from the start in cinema. So, but of course, Maroun Baghdadi understood completely that he cannot put, we can see that very clearly, in fact, in his film, Little Wars, because Little Wars had the archetype of a very conventional film, but the people are not, it's not, I mean, two sides, things moves, but again, he didn't invent that. So this paradox of a very conventional cinema way of doing, again, I'm not going against that. I mean, he done what he had done. I mean, this is him. But I still don't understand your word, sorry, أنا حكيتك لفت قواعد. I'm going back to this word, montage. And for me, the montage, especially that he's filmmaker, it's weird. It's a weird word for me here, because really, it's a very conventional montage for me, what his work was. And I saw his movies, not only once. Sorry, خلاص سكتت.
No, I understand. Thank you for opposing, and of course I disagree with you, I disagree with you fully, because I don't think that, and you can nuance that later, even though I know that many read Baghdadi as part of the Scorsese Coppola mouvance, and he trained with Coppola and he loves Scorsese and he finds stuff like that, I really think that Baghdadi, he is the tenant of modern sectarian cinema. And this is what I'm saying. I'm saying, of course, he's a modernist, and this is the conventional side. You see, if I'm comparing him to someone, I'm not comparing him to Scorsese, nor to Coppola, nor to Alain René. Scorsese, Coppola, Alain René, they use irrational cuts. The most simple example, if you take Alain René, you have the guy remembers a scene and then you jump into a whole different dimension and then you jump to a whole different dimension. And this is due to the power of memory. You know, je t'aime, I think. So these are irrational cuts. Now, in a classical movie, you have rational cuts, meaning really Eisenstein or John Ford, you have an unfolding of situation, action, situation, following rational cuts. It's very simple what I'm saying. The guy is going to the office. What is the sequence of the guy going to the office? He shuts the door, he's in the street, he's in the office. Now, these are rational cuts because they follow the order or the articulation of the concept. Me, what I'm saying is that Baghdadi, he is a modernist, hence, of course, he seems to be conventional, but he is a sectarian modernist, meaning he doesn't use irrational cuts. The reality he's portraying is not diluted. If you take Taxi Driver, which is the cinema where you're neither good nor bad and stuff like that, I think we shouldn't stick here at the representation of the character. Take Taxi Driver, what is quite remarkable in Taxi Driver is that there's no unity at all in the taxi driving in New York. You have these shots of New York, which are at man height. It's horizontal shot. And the guy sees a group of drug dealers, then he sees a guy going out with his girlfriend, then he sees this and this and that. And you have absolutely no relation between these parts. It's like the Ballad movie. The Ballad movie, you have diluted, unrelated segments, which is due in the time of Scorsese and Coppola to the collapse of the big narrative. Meaning you don't have anymore the American dream, the Russian Revolution to organize all the parts in one organic totality. So you have the dilution of all of that. If you watch Apocalypse Now, for me it's a ballad. It's like a road trip across the Vietnam where you have all these optical, sonorous things that they see, and they are in the boat, a bit like Taxi Driver, and everything is diluted and unrelated. On the other hand, I think that Baghdadi has a very strong rationale, even though the rationale is, as you say, it paradoxical, because there is a logic, and Baghdadi, he wants to understand Lebanon. He's not saying there are powers that don't allow us to understand. He's saying we can understand Lebanon, and it's structured around these contrasts. Now, of course, when you structure your movie in a sectarian world under the modernist, meaning the classical umbrella, you have what you call the paradox inside the paradox, which is, yes, you have a conventional structure, but the montage is sectarian, it's not classical. Meaning in a classical montage, times is chronological. In a classical montage, in a classical movie, the characters are either well-defined or they incarnate the concept, so on and so forth. I can expand on this list for a long time, but when it comes to the word montage, for me, the word montage is not only confined to cinema, even though there's, of course, montage in cinema. It is, for me, the basic function of the manifest or the aesthetical work, which means any artist, he makes a montage. If you are a painter, a sculptor, a conceptual artist, whatever kind of art you're doing, you will do a montage because you're going to put this with that. And as soon as you put this with that, be it two views or collage or anything, the montage is the most generic name to having this and that. Now, of course, movies, they use montage and they made, they intensified the montage, and it just stops there. So for me, the reel itself, before the movies, is doing its montage. This is why I referred to, I showed you images from reality, like you have sandbags inside an office, you have a marriage inside the ruins, you have all kinds of images that come from the war, where you have this kind of sectarian montage around actual facts. So the question is this: do you consider you then that the movies by Baghdadi are like Scorsese? Do you feel that they are the same? Because for me, it seems to me that for you, it's either classical cinema like Eisenstein, John Ford, etc., or the postmodern cinema like like Scorsese, Coppola, Godard, etc. And that's it. Me, I think that no,
Oh, of course not, Habibi. Of course not. It's not. Again, it's not black and white. يعني دخيلك لا.
But I mean, in this conversation, when it comes to Baghdadi, it seems that the options are either he must be with Scorsese or with Eisenstein, but he cannot be something else. Me, I'm saying he can be something else, which is a sectarian model. This is why I think that you are a sectarian postmodern, which is, I think, the actual thought is you have these characters that carry this past, and so in short, I'd stop here and we can comment. I think really the sectarian is an aesthetics on its own. I really think that. I think that the center of capital produces an aesthetics on the periphery, which is properly sectarian, meaning it cannot fit with the categories that we have from the center, meaning from the stuff we know about. And it needs a reconceptualization to really get what he's doing without reducing him to one of the forms that we already know. For me, this is the whole work to do, because without that, I think there's first we miss what is really going on, and we can't forget the politics of in the art. Do you agree? You think he can be reduced to Antonio, to Scorsese?
I don't want to reduce anything, Habibi. I'm not reducing anything. I'm just saying that it's not anyway. Even putting Scorsese and Godard in the same editing, I don't agree with that. But it's not about that. It's not about. We all know there is so many. I understand the non-chronological, the non-rational, and of course, but this would need to put his film and talk literally, which is another thing. We can't do it. His films or this film especially, because it happens that I saw it at the time. And, it was shown au France 3, I don't know where exactly, in France. Sorry?
Yeah, it's a TV movie.
No, I saw it at the time, so I remember quite, So for me, and even by the way, for me, Maroun Baghdadi created a kind of archetype, Lebanese archetype in his films. If you want to talk about archetypes, he created a kind of archetype about through the paradoxes of this country. So for me, he's not so far from the narrative as we know it, built on archetypes. But you know that I'm not fond of his work, but I was curious to hear, and this needs really a long talk.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for intervening and opposing. But
I see Walid hand. There was a request by Liam. I don't know if we can have the request by Liam, who had chatted, and then we go to Walid, if that's okay. Liam, are you still here? Did you want to?
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello,
okay. Hi, Faris. Hi, everybody. So I have somewhat of a boring request. I just want Faris to re-clarify how the diagrams of the different systems over like the years like fit into the whole presentation, which I super enjoyed, by the way.
Thank you, Liam. So I'll show you that. Yeah, can you see the diagram?
Yeah, press the green button if you want in the top left.
Can you see it now, Liam?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So sorry, so you see me, of course, this is a diagram, and I hope you'll excuse me for being so schematic. You see, Mehdi Amil, all what I did is that I coupled the book by Mehdi Amil and Fawaz Trabulsi. Okay, I think that Mehdi Amil really gives a kind of very strong conceptual framework, and Fawaz Trabulsi provide all the details, documents, etc. And when you put them together, you get a good account of the Lebanese thing. So you see, Mehdi Amil says that the paradox of the revolution in the Arab world and in Lebanon specifically is that the revolution is most of the time carried by the bourgeoisie or by those who are in power. I hope this idea is clear. And it's a paradox because how do you want the bourgeoisie to give you social justice and sovereignty? It's almost impossible. So the first type that you see here is the 1943 revolt. You had an alliance between the financial bourgeoisie, that of Khouri, and the merchant bourgeoisie, that of Riyad al-Salah, in alliance with the British, the Brits, against the French. And this is how they were able to get the independence. Now, for Mehdi Amil, this is, you don't need to have a lot of hopes in this kind of revolution because it's led by the interest of the banking and the merchant system or groups. Now, what happened in the 1950s is that you had a really like a very hegemony of the consortium, which made the popular classes and the Zaims and the merchant classes quite upset. And this is when you had an alignment between Jmayil, Jumblat, and Sham'oun against Khouri, which was known as the political social front against Khouri. Is this clear? Okay. So here you had a financial kind of governance, and they divided against that. Now, the thing is that on the question of the Baghdad Pact, and this is recurrent in the history, each time you have an external problem, you have a division in the social front. On the Baghdad Pact, Sham'oun didn't want to join Nasser, and he preferred to be close still with the Americans, and he split from Jmayil and Jumblat. This gives you, here's the financial republicanism and the events of 1958. What's interesting in the events of 1958 is that Sham'oun wanted to abolish sectarianism. He was against sectarianism because he wanted to create a purely financial republic. And this was opposed by Jumblat, Jmayil, as the landlords, which are part of the system. As you know, I hope it's clear that the system is a kind of a joint venture between the financial groups and the landlords. Now, on the Palestinian question, you had another split. The Jumayil-Jumblat alliance was cut in half, and Jumayil didn't want to, he went into the identitarian logic that he didn't want a massive Palestinian presence. He was afraid of an invasion of the Palestinian in Lebanon, as it was rumored back then, and hence he joined Sham'oun and the financial group. So at that point, the first war was ready, where you had on two sides two popular masses, and the opposition was set. And when the Palestinians got armed with the Cairo Pact in '69, well, things were really ripe for a military confrontation, and Mehdi Amil was for the military confrontation because for him the only way to remove sectarianism and to achieve independence in Lebanon, meaning concrete independence, is to fight in the same time against the sectarian system and against Israel in the same time. Because for him, Israel is what is, if you want, the police or the army of the colonial forces in the Middle East. And if you really want to have independence financially, politically, etc., you need to defeat them on both fronts. Of course, this revolutionary formula was crushed in 2 years. Notably, even the Syrians were against it because no one wants to have revolutionary states all around the region, and it failed. I think there's anyway an inherent kind of paradox in the structure itself, because at the end of the day, it's led by a landlord, which is Kamal Jumblat himself. But anyway, this structure failed, leading to the what Fawaz Trabulsi calls the war order. The war order, you have the financial group was central and coordinating the Zaims on both sides. And it's really described in detail by Fawaz Trabulsi as economy of war, where you see how they were making money on all sides and how you had companies between all the different zaims and the bankers. And this was the 80s till the 90s. This is this structure here. With the 2005, you had a split between Hezbollah, backed up by Iran, and his popular base and his middle-class base. And you had, around the Hariri assassination, a free-floating mass of revolutionary, but that was, as you know, co-opted by the 14th of March. So this gives you this configuration. And I think today, if you want to do a diagram of today, if you want to have this kind of thing, today what you have, I think, is the financial group is on the side of the East for once, at least for the time being. And it is in the Manzuma, as we say. You have a free-floating mass of revolutionaries which don't have any, or not yet any, political representation, and most probably they will get divided on questions of sovereignty, like if you are with Israel or not. And with the Kirk last manifestation, you have the constitution of a bunch of zaims like the Kataib, Jaja, etc., that are calling for a military backup from the West against the group which is here, which is backed up by Iran. And this brings us, it's a bit of a symmetrical situation as in 75, but then you put the differences that you see. Is the diagram a bit more clear or still not?
The diagram was pretty clear, but what I was sorry, I don't want to hog the mic for too long, but like maybe what I understand is that the dichotomy is between, you said, capital and sectarianism. So is it between being sectarian and being whatever non-territorial? That's the real dichotomy. And how does this fit into everything else? Sorry.
No, continue. No, the dichotomy is here. The sectarian structure couples financial groups with landlords, which gives it a very strong stability. You know, Jean Blatt in the documentary, the Harb al-Ahliya في Lebanon, Jean Blatt and Mehdi Fadlallah and a couple of historians, they say that the Lebanese political system is extremely stable. I know this sounds maybe paradoxical, but this is what a lot of people agree on, that it's a very stable political system as a system, because a real revolution in it or a real change of the system is practically impossible. So if you want today, if you want a real change, you have to fight against Iran, against Israel, against the IMF, and you have to build a political party representing all the revolutionaries in the street, which is practically, it's a kind of miracle for this to happen. So what you have is usually conflicts between the zaims or between the bankers and the zaims. And these conflicts, as per the analysis of Mehdi Amil, don't lead anywhere. They're just the activation of the structure. Capitalism, or what Mehdi Amil calls feudal capital, feudalism and capitalism joined together, is this. Is these structures where you have an alliance between financial groups and zaims, backed up by the West or today by the East, because you have capitalism on both sides today. And you have a deadlock because you can't get out of this structure. This is what leads to the stagnating time. Is it more clear or still Chinese?
Yes, much clearer, yes.
Oh. So
Walid, do you want to? Walid has a. Where are you?
Yeah, thank you, Faris. Thank you very much. I want to try make a couple of observations as an attempt to make sense of the difference between you and Ghassan.
Yeah.
I hope that just to understand further the city in which we live and what aesthetics are possible in the city. It seems to me that perhaps there is a particular montage that is capable of producing a kind of a third meaning, like to recall that the essay by Roland Barthes about montage, right? That montage is not simply a cut it is a kind of it is a forced visual metaphor, as in like the surrealist would do, right? Forcing two dissimilar things together to generate a third. So that's part. And there is another montage that you seem to use synonymously with cut in your presentation that does not generate a third meaning. And I'm thinking that perhaps there is something very precise about this this montage that does not generate a third meaning to Beirut, to Baghdadi, to the work by Walid Zbib, which is echoed by something that the novelist Lias Khouri often says, which is he often says that the city of Beirut has never generated or prompted poetry. It has always generated and prompted الرواية, which I think should be here translated not as novels, but as prose, that Beirut prompts prose and not poetry. There are very few poets who wrote about Beirut. Mahmoud Darwish wrote a bit, what's her name? Twaini wrote a little bit, but primarily it's a city for prose, which makes me think, and this is like to an attempt to transpose the difference between you and Ghassan onto semiotics a bit. And if you remember, Roman Jakobson has written an important essay where he talks that in language, he's talking about pathologies and people's ability to speak. And he speaks of a vertical axis, which he calls the metaphoric axis. And then there's the horizontal axis, which is the metonymic. And it seems to me maybe we can understand the difference between the two kinds of montage and what makes Beirut specific during the war and then after the war, or supposedly after the official end of the war, is that the metaphoric pole, the metaphoric axis, which is that of poetry, right? Of again, creating a montage that generates a third, is the one that is disrupted. And the horizontal axis, the metonymic one, which is based on contiguity, like putting one thing next to the other in a kind of a chronology that perhaps doesn't move, but it's still A plus B plus C, is the one that seems to function. And what's ironic is that if we think through Roman Jakobson's text, we realize that what the war has generated is not only an activation of the metonymic pole, the prose pole, but also the disruption, a pathology of the vertical metaphoric poetic pole. I don't want to pathologize so much, but it seems to me like maybe it's a way to understand a difference between one kind of poetic metaphoric montage and a metonymic prose-like montage that you've been talking about.
I hear two questions. The first one is, which you relate to the metaphorical, is when you do a montage, is there a third? Like you put two images and there must be kind of something else that comes out of it. Me, in this sense, it's the way I understand aesthetics and montage is that the third, which could be the meaning, the spirit, or whatever third entity, or the poetics, or the real. For me, the third is always already here. Really, this is like a position that I defend or I try to maintain, which is even in classical cinema, the third is always already here. Meaning Eisenstein, he makes a movie in accordance to the structure of the real. And after all, everything he does is the same form as the real he is inscribed in. So I say that Baghdadi, he puts highly contrasted elements together. It's not just metonymical, it's the actual sectarian cut, because Lebanon itself functions like that. If you want, Lebanon itself functions by putting together a telephone with sandbags. And this is, rigorously speaking, not a metonymy, the way I understand it. I understand the way you're using here metonymy, which is to put things in contiguity. But metonymy usually has a concept that defines the two metonymical elements. For example, if you take Eisenstein, he uses metaphors and metonymies. For example, in a scene from Strike, he shows you a spy standing and his legs are like the chimneys of the factory. So you have the legs and the chimneys, and it's like that. So you see first the legs, then you see the chimney. This is a metonymy, and the meaning that comes out of it is that the spy is an ally of the industrials. This is the third. If you take another metaphor now by Eisenstein, the bourgeois are pigs. Now, this you find it in the Potemkin and in Strike and many pictures. Now, what does he do? He fuses the two concepts, bourgeois and pig, into one image where you see the bourgeois face, doing mimicries like a pig. And this is the metaphor, and you understand that the bourgeois are pig. And here Eisenstein says, we have a judgment in the image. I'm able to make you judge the bourgeoisie as pig, if you like them or not, just by transferring the scheme of the pig into the face of the bourgeois. The way the face of the pig moves, this is the scheme. I put it on the face of the bourgeois, and I have my metaphor. You see, metaphor is you have two concepts which merge into one image, and metonymy, you have two images which gives you one concept. To make it clear. I think, this is why I showed it here, I think that metaphors and metonymies, not the way you're using it here, are on the side, rigorously speaking, are on the side of classical democratic cinema, because the meaning is well defined. I think this is really the key thing. We know bourgeois are pigs, spies are enmeshed with the industrials, the workers are Greek gods, because you have metaphors in Eisenstein in that sense, where he films workers as if they are Greek statues. And I think that the condition of possibility of the metaphor and the metonymy is to have a well-defined, unified concept, like the Russian Revolution, the American Dream, or the French universalism. On the other hand, in the sectarian image, you have duplicates and doubles, which is, I think, quite different. For example, at one point in Baghdadi's movies, he says, one of the characters in Hors la Vie says, you know what, you can travel to France while staying in Lebanon. Because here too, we also have Verdun, Rue Clemenceau, Jeanne d'Arc, Place de l'Étoile. And this is what you call a duplicate, meaning the colonial powers, they duplicate themselves into the periphery of capital. And the duplication is itself an expression of the dual concept, where you have one concept, which is Verdun, and you have Verdun in Africa, you have Verdun in Lebanon, you have Verdun in France, and hence you have a duplication. For example, if you take Louvre, Abu Dhabi, it's the same thing. And here I think these are not metaphors nor metonymy in the first sense, in the sense that you have two concepts that can merge into one image that expresses the meaning or the direction we have to take. I think Baghdadi uses duplicates, where you have a guy which is, he's two things at the same time, or he's a copy of something, and he uses doubles. Doubles is when you have the surnames. You have Frankenstein, Rambo, you have Al-Hakim, and these names are the doubles of the real people, because as a real person, you are a civilian and you have your double. And I think here you have two concepts for one image, but it doesn't merge, it doesn't synthesize. So indeed, as you say, there is a kind of pathology, because in quotes, the metonymies here, which are not metonymies because they don't synthesize, they are actually doubles, and the metaphors are duplicates. And this is why you end up having something like that. This is from Walid Zbib, where you have cars which are bombs, but it's not a metaphor. Really, the car is a bomb. And when you look at the car, you wonder if it's a car or a bomb, you know, in the heydays of the car explosion. And this is a project from Al Hadass, where you have street names, and here he put Verdun Street. And the Al-Hadath project is to take pictures of places in Lebanon and to give them 3 addresses. So you have, this kind of duplication. And it's a type of photography which comes from the sectarian, what I call montage. For me, the montage is this operation. So this is why I think, I hope answering all the elements of the question, you see, there's not a third in the sense that we are not under an umbrella that provide meaning, but all what you can do is play on jumping from one foot to the other. And this is why instead of having metonymies, you have doubles, and instead of having metaphors, you have duplicates, and also you have ambiguities. We don't know if Jean Blatt was doing what he was doing because he wanted the Druze to take power or because he was a real Democrat. And I think all of these effects that affect our perception and our way of telling stories and making images are due to this encompassing real structure. And this is why I think that the montage only concentrates, amplifies, or make manifest what is already there playing in the manifest world. I hope, did I answer more or less? And I think the pathology, the pathology is in this sense, it's here, is that you can't have neither a hero nor metaphors nor this kind of poetry here because of this kind of disturbance in the structure.
But Faris, this is interesting, but one small comment. Yeah. Should we not be cautious when we say that the cuts in a film by Baghdadi, they make manifest the real? Yani, what happens to that mediating transition between the real world and the aesthetic world? It seems to me that when you present what you're presenting, it seems that this mediation is erased, like almost like an avant-garde claim, right? That there is no difference between the world and the work of art. Can you perhaps clarify this?
I'm not saying that there's no difference between the world and the work of art, as you mentioned. Thank you for mentioning that as an avant-garde gesture, meaning art is life and life is art. Yeah, I'm not really saying that. I'm saying that an aesthetics, the way I see it, which is grounded on the notion of montage, where actually you need to see what is being put with what, be it in the real or in the movie. This aesthetics functions in the same way in the 2 dimensions. I give you the example, what I think is one of the examples you give, which is excessive witnessing, for example. You have this situation which is in real life between someone sitting safely and the region being bombarded. And it is this ratio which is translated into, let's say, Rania Stefan movie On the Wall, where you have someone who still has his capacities, filming someone who suffered from the bombardment, and the relation behind the camera, in front of the camera, is the same as the relation between someone sitting safely at home while on the other side of the street is being bombarded. Now, this is what I call an immanent aesthetics. The world as a world is already generating images, relations, ways of seeing, ways of speaking, so on and so forth. And I think in that sense, the work of art doesn't recreate or mediate, but it concentrates, it amplifies. If you want a metaphor here, it's a microscope rather than an artistic creation where you have another space in which you do your thing. Artworks, as far as I'm concerned, and this aesthetics are more really like tools to amplify, concentrate, make visible what is already there. So the best approximation is the microscopes, the telescopes, all of these tools that we use, where nothing is created per se. This is, if you want another statement of this aesthetic, is that there's no creation in art. All what there is to see what is already there, and to be able to see what is already there, where you shouldn't fall into the hegemonic way of doing images, which are constructed when it comes to the classical cinema on chronological time, heroes, spaces, metaphors, metonymies. And I think the only way to resist culturally that, if you are a modernist, is to do something where you are really sensitive to the image in the piece. And this is where, to conclude, this is where the representation of politics becomes anti-political. This is why I think if you want to make a movie which represents, let's say, the struggle between a Palestinian and a Christian, if you do it by following the Hollywoodian model, you miss the creation of a culture that can resist this other culture.
You're talking about the insult here, right?
I'm talking about the insult, or many other movies take Nadine Levaki, the insult, or you have also works of art which I think are not sensitive, this is what I think, to the specificity of the place. And when you miss that, well, you do something else. You do something else which could be very popular in other places, but when I see it here, I feel there's something a bit wrong. Why is it wrong? Because I feel that structurally, I'm not used to this kind of arrangement or montage. Am I a bit clear about that?
No, very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I think there's one more. Sorry. I think yes, please. I guess. Do you wanna say your question, or I can read it out?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So yeah, my question is, I mean, obviously this has been very interesting. But I mean, my curiosity is towards Walid, and I'm just wondering, you know, if he's still making those posters, and if he is, what would they look like now?
Unfortunately, I'm not. My major was fine arts in BUC. I studied fine arts and sculptures. I did some sculpture work here, some murals and a few sculptures, but I haven't been dedicated to this. Maybe, inshallah, I'm willing to go back soon after I retired. But I did another poster back then. It was about the crossroad between East Beirut and West Beirut, and this was also, I used to cross this road a lot, and I used to see a lot of actions, and I depicted all this in that poster. But these were my only two illustrations, but usually I'm more, my passion is sculpture.
Okay. Great. Yeah, thank you. I answered the question. Anyone, sorry, I'm just checking the chat. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Okay, I'm scrolling through the thing to see if any hands. No. Okay, speak now or. Great, thanks, Zainab. Okay, any final comments, Faris, or we wrap up for the.
Thank Walid. And also thank and all of those who endured that.
Sorry, Faris, it's not very clear, your voice. Sorry, we're not really. I don't know if it's only me. I don't know.
I'm just saying thank you for coming, and this is why I was able to say all these things I wanted to say about these issues. So I really thank also Walid to throw me the ball and incite me to do the talk. I think that's it for tonight. So hopefully see you soon, and Ghassan, I'll bring the movie and we will sit.
Yeah. It's complex to say so many, to embrace such a big, huge thing not only in such a short time, but in this very strange way of talking. You know, I only have pieces of your faces, which is very weird. But with the good whiskey, it's better. Thank you. And yeah, hopefully Faris will do that physically.
Okay. Yes. Sure.